Hey everyone, it's Suzanne, and I want to thank you for joining us for the So Suzy podcast, where we help you build a business out of the hobby you love. You will also be able to get the show notes and the links we reference by visiting us at sosuzypodcast.com. July 18th is the third birthday for the MISTI, the most incredible stamp tool invented, by Ileana Mishka from My Sweet Petunia. If you have not heard of the MISTI and have no clue what I'm talking about, it is a life-changing stamp tool, and before the non-believers start rolling their eyes, let me explain very quickly why. My grandmother loves to stamp. She makes cards for everyone in her church, and there are a slew of them. But every month, my grandma makes them all birthday and anniversary cards. But she noticed that as she gets older, holding those blocks in her hands, we're getting very uncomfortable, and her grip just isn't what it used to be. When the MISTI first came out, I made sure and bought one for my grandma to help with her stamping. Never in a million years would I have thought the MISTI would have such an impact. Not only did it help my grandma, but it renewed her love for stamping. She tried new techniques, bought stamps she never would have purchased, and makes even more cards than she did before. So when I say it is life-changing, I mean it. The little old people who get a card from my grandma are so appreciative. They look forward to their birthdays just so they can get one of her cards, and they never fail to thank her for her thoughtfulness. Sometimes the only cards they receive are from the lady at church, aka my grandma. It makes them feel special, and my grandma is able to do that for them because of the MISTI. Life changer. Earlier this year, we interviewed Ileana for our Made It Happen Monday podcast, and we'll have a link to that podcast in our show notes, so you can hear firsthand Ileana's story behind the MISTI. But essentially, Ileana started out like so many of us, needing to create a slew of cards for Christmas, and instead of complaining about it like I do, she invented a stamp tool that would make multiple stamping a breeze. At first, it was just for her, but it wasn't long before she realized others could benefit from it too. So on July 18th, 2014, she built the first ever MISTI to sell on Facebook. She handmade each one in her basement, and if you remember back when this all came about, you know what we would have to go to get our hands on one of these babies. Late nights, hovering over the computer, fingers ready to hit that buy now button, praying we were one of the lucky few who could snag 1 or 5 because our friends needed them too. From that moment, not only did the lives of people like my grandmother change, but the stamping industry received a huge kick in the pants and was revitalized like never before. People who were frustrated by stamping due to ailments started stamping again. Crafters like my mother, who can't stamp straight to save her life, actually started to enjoy making cards and purchased stamps of her own. Silhouette stamps became more sought after because people didn't need to worry about the image not stamping all the way. Mirror image stamping found a new life, and layering stamps didn't seem so scary now that we had the MISTI. Rubber stamps that weren't indexed finally didn't seem so taboo. Stamp companies started popping up all over the place. Facebook friendships were born out of the common love for the MISTI. Groups were created to fuel the love and inspire crafters to make more cards, try new things, discover new companies. This is a life changer for so many, all because one lady had an idea, saw a need, and filled it. In honor of that third anniversary, we're going to take the time today to talk about the different ways you can use the MISTI for your cards. And, did I mention that today is the last day to get 20% off the original MISTI grid paper and mouse pads? Well, it is if you're those people who don't listen to our podcast. Ileana has graciously extended the sale date until Sunday, July 23rd, just for us. And if you do not have one yet, I highly encourage you to head over to My Sweet Petunia to pick one up. You don't need a coupon, and I will have a link to My Sweet Petunia in the show notes if you're interested. While researching new tips and uses for the MISTI, I did find some great ideas on YouTube from Justine Hovey, Ken's Creations, and Gina K Designs. A lot of these are pretty basic, but there were a few tips that were a definite light bulb moment. Obviously, basic stamping. It doesn't matter if you're using photopolymer or cling rubber stamps. The MISTI can handle them all. For the photopolymer, you'll keep the black foam inside the MISTI or one of the mouse pads she sells. And for the cling, you will remove the foam and stamp away. Super easy, super simple. I will wholeheartedly admit that I am a rubber stamp girl. Photopolymer isn't my favorite. It stinks, sticks to the paper, and you don't get the detail that you can with red rubber. But that's just me. However, with rubber stamps, you don't get the benefit of seeing through the rubber to make sure it's straight on the paper, which is why the MISTI is great for test stamping and helping you to align and test your stamps, especially for the ones that aren't indexed. In layman's terms, this means there's no image on the backside. I am not sure why some companies don't index, but now that I have the MISTI, I don't mind so much anymore. Because of the test stamping feature, I can simply place a piece of grid paper onto the MISTI, place my stamp where I want it on my card, ink it up, stamp it onto the grid paper, and get it straight before I ruin my precious cardstock. Accurate stamping. How many times have you stamped a sentiment as the final part of your card and it doesn't stamp all the way, or the ink isn't dark enough? This can be totally devastating. With the MISTI, it's a non-issue because you can just re-ink and stamp again. No worries and no stress. She's like the BFF that holds your hair when you have your head in the toilet. And I love silhouette or solid stamps. They are so much fun, easy to use as long as they stamp completely. I remember back in pre-MISTI days when I'd be making Christmas cards with that fabulous Wise Man stamp from Stampin' Up, and wouldn't you know it, the frickin' thing wouldn't ink all the way. So I'd have to get my blender pen or marker and color it in. Talk about frustrating. Now I can use those silhouette stamps with no problems. If they don't ink completely, I could just restamp it. Same goes with the big word stamps that are now out. I just made 50 thank you cards for my mom with that huge thanks stamp from the ton. And every now and again, I'd have to re-ink it. I didn't have to throw away a single card for a bad impression. There is nothing that adds a bit of wow factor more than embossing powder. It can make an image or sentiment pop, and the added texture can truly change the look. If you like to stamp your sentiments in colored ink, but you want that raised, embossed look, you don't have to worry about buying 9 million different colors of embossing powder. Simply stamp in your favorite color of ink with the MISTI, then ink your stamp with Versamark, and stamp over the sentiment and sprinkle with clear embossing powder. It will totally save you money on supplies so you can spend that extra cash on more stamps. If you like to color with Copics but would like the outline to be embossed, do the same thing. Stamp with your Memento ink, color your image, and when you're finished, stamp back over it with the Versamark and emboss it with clear. It will give you that embossed look without ruining your Copics. Just don't remove the stamp from your MISTI until after you're finished. This next tip is from Justine Hovey and super cool. I will have a link to her video showing this in our show notes because it's better seen than explained, but it's for stamping and die cuts. You will actually die cut your paper before you stamp. Put the original paper that you used the die cut on in your MISTI. In a space that's empty from the die, you will position your stamp inside of that space. Pick it up with the MISTI, put the missing die cut back into that empty space, and then stamp it with the MISTI. No need to worry that you have the die cut positioned correctly around your image, chopping off a foot or a wing, because the MISTI makes it so simple to get it right. The MISTI can also assist with masking. And with the creative corners, it makes the MISTI even more valuable. Stamp your image where you want it. Place the Post-it note or masking paper over that stamped image and stamp again. Cut it out. place it over the original stamped image, and instead of moving your stamp, move your paper up and down, over to the side. Gina K has an incredible video using the ruler on the side of the MISTI to show you some great ways to create a cute card by using the repeat stamping technique. Simply place your image you want to repeat at the top of the paper. Stamp, and in this case, it was a cute pencil. Move the paper up 1/4 of an inch. Stamp again. Move the paper up again another 1/4 of an inch and stamp. And you repeat this until you have the desired effect. No worries on alignment or equal spacing in between the images. And I will also have the link to Gina's video on how she made her pencil card in the show notes as well, because it is just super cute and Gina is amazing. If you enjoy making your own backgrounds, the MISTI makes those backgrounds so easy to whip up. Instead of stamping randomly on your paper, you can just place the stamps on your paper, close the lid of the MISTI to pick them all up at one time, ink them up, and stamp on the paper. And voila! It's all finished in one fell swoop. Plus, if you're making a bunch at one time, leave the stamps on the lid. Place another piece of paper inside and stamp again. The MISTI makes repeat stamping a breeze, and you'll be done in no time flat. I bought an absolutely adorable fairy house from Lavinia Stamps, and I wanted to have a really cool different color gradient or ombre look to the house. So I inked up the house in a bunch of different colors and stamped it onto the paper with my MISTI. I was able then to go back in and fill in the empty spots and boost the colors in select areas and stamp again. The same goes for that ombre or gradient look. Ink your stamp with the lightest color, stamp onto the paper. Ink the middle with your medium color and stamp it. Then take the darkest color and repeat. It's a quick and easy way to get that ombre look that you control versus a pricey ink pad that has its limitations. And those super cool layering stamps that everyone seems to be coming out with now, the MISTI makes those so easy to use. I've been having a ball with the tulips and sunflowers from the ton. And instead of being intimidated by the different layers, it's so dang easy when I could just line them up using my MISTI and stamp away. If you enjoy watercoloring your stamps, you will be aware of how much of a pain in the butt it is to actually get a clean impression when you go to stamp your sentiment. The texture leaves gaps and the paper may soak up some of your ink. Do I really need to say that the MISTI comes to your rescue once again? Because it does. The multiple stamping allows you to ink and restamp as many times as you need to get a clean impression. Now, I am a big supporter of stamping on the outside and inside of your cards. And with the original MISTI, you can actually stamp your front and inside at the same time. If you're making a whole bunch of cards, this can save you so much time. And don't be afraid to use all the space on your MISTI. If you can stamp more than one thing at a time with the space available, do it. Back in the day when I was making thousands of cards every year, and I mean thousands, I would stamp a sentiment I wanted to use on a piece of acetate. And then I'd move it around on the card to see where the best place to put the sentiment would be. Then I would say a little prayer and hope to God when I stamped it, the sentiment would be straight and in the vicinity of where I wanted it. Now, I don't have to use the acetate. I can place my card inside of the MISTI and close the lid, and then move my sentiment around on top of the grid. Now, there are times when I still will use the acetate. If there's fear of residual ink on the stamp, I will place the acetate over the card panel, place my stamp on top of the acetate. Once the stamp is on the lid, I can remove the acetate and stamp onto the paper without fear. Along with the layering stamps, there are a couple of other type of stamps that the MISTI has resurrected. One is the mirror image stamp. I am definitely partial to the mirror image stamp, primarily because when Ileana had the idea of trying to see if the MISTI could help with this technique, she gave me a buzz, and we played with the different designs for the mirror image stamp, with foam, without, and then the size of the rubber for the mirror image. After playing with the different design styles, we decided on an A2 size with just the plain rubber so it could be used with photopolymer and cling stamps. Plus, it cuts down the price when there is no cling cushion and it really isn't necessary. Now, if you want to have an image facing the opposite direction, want a reflection in water or a mirror, you can use your MISTI with the mirror image stamp from So Suzy Stamps. The size is great for any size stamp or project, and it gives you a lot more uses from your stamps. You can have kissing dinosaurs for Valentine's Day, a reflection of trees in a lake, or fairy reflections on a moonlit night. The other stamp idea that Ileana had was the Turnabout stamp from Concord and Ninth. If you haven't seen this stamp in action, we will have a link in our show notes to show you. It is absolutely wild. Essentially, you can make all kinds of great new designs by using the same stamp, only you turn the paper to fill in the gaps. The possibilities of designs and colors are endless, and it would be next to impossible to do without the MISTI. Now, I do have a confession to make as we come down to our last tip, and that is, I have not one MISTI, but 6 of them. Yes, 6 MISTIs. I don't have the memory MISTI, but I do have the original and mini MISTIs. And not only do they allow me to be lazy and hold my stamps when I'm not using them, but they worked out amazing when it came to card classes. Not only did it make my more pedantic stampers happy, but my older ladies with arthritis loved it. And again, they didn't have to worry about gripping the block, dropping the stamp on their paper, or being able to put the right amount of pressure on the block. And those people who feel the need to rock their stamp, well, they stopped having those rocking borderlines on their cards. My class participants were happier, they were less frustrated, and it made them feel like they could do this at home on their own. Again, life-changing. So just as a quick recap, the MISTI helps with basic stamping, accurate stamping, solid and silhouette stamps, aligning and test stamping, embossing after you've stamped, die-cut placement, stamping on textured paper, layering stamps, mass production, do-it-yourself backgrounds, gradient or ombre stamping, masking, repeat stamping, stamping the inside and outside of your cards using acetate, mirror image stamping, the turnabout stamps from Concord and Ninth, and it saves you a ton of money. If you have a fabulous MISTI tip or trick that we haven't listed, please let us know in our show notes or on our Facebook page. And if the MISTI has made a positive impact on your stamping life, we would love to hear about it. And don't forget, July 23rd is the last day for the 20% off the original MISTI. If you haven't purchased one yet, now is definitely the perfect time to do so. And before we go, we have a new segment on our Friday podcast. Every Friday, we'll be bringing you a helpful tip from you, our listeners. Today's tip is by Karen Hightower. Karen is a lady after my own heart and truly a special craft sister, and she has this to say. Finish the inside of your card and always sign the back. You have put time and effort into creating it, so sign your creation. Thank you for the tip, Karen, and she is so right. Complete your card, finish the inside, put in an extra layer to balance the weight of the front of your card, and sign the back. It not only finishes the card, but it acts as a special memory for the person receiving it. And if you would like to contribute a tip, please join our So Suzy podcast Facebook group and share your words of wisdom. And until next time, this is Suzanne, and you have been listening to the So Suzy podcast. Happy stamping!